David, you introduced me to this concept of strategic retreat. What does that term mean?
Humans have long thought that the way it is the way it will always be. So, in other words, the tides are more or less the same. The stars are more or less the same. The temperature is more or less the same. The seasons are more or less the same. And what that does is it makes you not understand the dynamic of Earth. So we've built 8 billion of us in cities and places based on what was or what is, not what will be, right? So, for example, beachfront property in Florida is the highest priced property. Why? Because it's beachfront. But where I was in Florida, for example, the sea level rose 1 foot over 120 years, so an inch a decade. For the next 25 years, it's going to double that. So it's going to be an inch a year in the next. So how is beachfront property going to be valuable? It's going to be gone, right? So the strategic retreat in Florida is going to be away from the coasts or north out of the state or whatever. So with sea level rise and with the temperature rise, the extreme weather, that's the transitioning term we have, is really just the Earth in its own rhythm reacting more slowly to us. You know, forest fires, extreme weather is just the Earth, that all the tornadoes that have happened, all of this is just the Earth responding to what we've done to it.
And then we will respond by moving to safer places. So you talked about fires, but what are some of the other reasons or catalysts behind the strategic retreat?
Climate change will affect 100% of the human population. There's nobody that's not going to be affected by climate change. Okay, so if you live on a beach, the beach will be gone. If you live in a forest, the forest might be burned down. If you live in out in the country, it might be a city. So the point is that we have the vast majority of humans living as we have always lived, but the world and the planet are changing. Strategic retreat is planned. So I'm going to use the case of Florida. So strategic retreat is moving people away from harm. So what that means is relocating the cities to the center of the state. The question for that is, that's a huge undertaking. We aren't even thinking of it now. In other words, we're reacting to, the weatherman comes on every night now. That's our reaction to climate change, not, I better move out of state, or we'd better take care of there isn't a governor in the United States of America that's planning for a strategic retreat because they don't understand the concept, they don't understand the future, they don't see what's happening. So the fact that there's either going to be every man for himself, or governments and institutions will start to create the structure of the strategic retreat from pretty much everywhere. And the easiest way for me was Florida. In other words, the most expensive property will be the most distressed property in 10 or 15 years.
One of the things that's interesting is lack of insurance, or the ability to get insurance. And I've been seeing stories about this in Florida and other parts of the country where you just can't get access to insurance. And I think these are some of the catalysts of the strategic retreat.
Now that you mentioned the insurance industry should be the ones saying, if you move to the center of the state, we'll give you better rates. The wherewithal to do strategic retreat is inherently existent in at least in this country.
What are some examples of countries or cities that are proactively redesigning for climate change?
Well, the Dutch are pretty good. The Scandinavian countries are pretty good. Bhutan is pretty good. I think but I don't think there's anybody that's doing enough. There's just nobody that's doing enough that comes to mind. I mean, there's people that are making efforts, they're putting in initiatives, there's more restrictions, governmental restrictions relative to usage and rights in Europe than in the United States. But again, it's a global problem. So if you solve it in this little tiny country here, I wrote a book once in 2019 where 79% of all the greenhouse gas emissions are triggered by the top 20 GDPs out of 200 countries. So 10% of the countries control 80% of the GDP. Okay, so if those 10 countries, 20 countries, lowered their emissions from 2019 to 2030 from 77% fossil fuel to 25%, the rest of the world wouldn't have to do anything, which is why the developed countries of the world have to solve the problem first, because we're creating the greatest problem.